Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
The mission of the Grow Louisiana Coalition is to rally support and raise awareness behind the state's key economic industries. We'll talk oil and gas when Marc Ehrhardt, Executive Director of the Grow Louisiana Coalition, joins us on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana. We are Brown & Root.
Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project.
For over a quarter century, Kelly's has operated with honesty, integrity, and above all, safety. Kelly's features a fleet of quality equipment operated by dedicated, safety-minded employees skilled in land clearing, above-ground right-of-way maintenance, vegetation control, station yard and manned facility maintenance, above-ground pipeline support, and more. Kelly's Industrial Services, where pipeline right-of-way maintenance gets done right.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Very pleased to be joined by Marc Ehrhardt. He is the Executive Director of the Grow Louisiana Coalition. Buddy, welcome.
Thank you, Tim. It's good to be here.
Glad you are. Give our viewers an overview of the Grow Louisiana Coalition. I talked a little bit about its mission in the open of the show, but let's talk about the history, the mission, the membership. Tell us about it.
Well, we began our work in 2014, and with the idea being that maybe the people and the leaders of the state of Louisiana were starting to take the oil and natural gas industry in the state for granted and figured, well, the industry's been here forever, it'll always be here. And that's not necessarily the case. And so we created the Grow Louisiana Coalition to create an environment and an entity that can educate people about the importance of the oil and natural gas industry to the state. More importantly, can educate people about how important it is to the way of life of 300,000 Louisianians working in and alongside the industry, and create an opportunity for people who support oil and natural gas in Louisiana to have a place to have their voice be heard.
And it is critically important because, you mentioned this idea that this industry can be taken for granted, and I certainly think that is the case. While it is important that we continue to work to diversify Louisiana's economy, it is at least as important that we remember where our primary economic drivers are, and certainly oil and gas is one of them. So let's talk about the industry in Louisiana. I know we rank very high in terms of crude oil and natural gas production, but talk about the economic impact, the employment, the state and local taxes paid. Give us an overview of the oil and gas industry in Louisiana.
Right now, if you were to take the oil and gas industry in the state of Louisiana and make it into its own country, the $20 billion earned by the people working in the industry in and of itself would be larger than 85 countries recognized by the United Nations. That's how big the industry is to the state of Louisiana and how important the people of Louisiana are in making that industry go. And over the years, right now, Louisiana ranks as the second largest producer of oil and second largest producer of natural gas. Number one is Texas. And right behind us is Alaska and then the Dakotas and things along those lines. And what the industry means to Louisiana and what Louisiana means to the industry is really integrated. It's a 100-year relationship. And at every point, you mentioned the idea of innovation and diversifying our economy and our industry in the state. One of the people that are at the forefront of all innovation in Louisiana is the oil and natural gas industry. So whenever there's been at the forefront of exploration in the Gulf of Mexico, whenever someone goes and explores for resources at a depth greater than we've ever gone before, there are Louisiana people and Louisiana companies who do it. We are the best when it comes to exploring for resources and taking those resources and turning them into literally hundreds of things that we use on a daily basis. And right now there is some things in terms of the industry size and its importance to the state that I don't know if we stop to recognize the level of importance, because we've always sort of seen, well, that facility's here, it's not going anywhere, or my uncle works in the industry, but I'm not really sure what he does. And what people can know and learn from is that the industry makes up right now 15% equivalent of the state's budget. $3 billion in taxes created just to the state every day. And that's funds because the industry is working. And the more productive the industry is, and the more thriving the industry is in Louisiana, those numbers go up. Now that's just for the state. When you look at parishes and local governments, it's the equivalent of the industry cutting a check of $3.5 million a day to one of the parishes, 64 parishes in the state.
Amazing.
That includes the weekends. And so the amount of funds that the industry is creating for us to build roads, open new schools, take care of hospitals and all these different things in our communities, literally building up communities. Since the oil and gas industry really began in earnest in terms of exploration in South Louisiana, places like Terrebonne and Lafourche have doubled and tripled in their populations. And you see the exact same thing as you go from east to west along I-10 in the state.
It is a critically important industry, playing a critically important role in terms of employment, tax revenue, but it also fits into the culture of our state. You mentioned that, I think, a little bit. I want to explore that some more. It is really a part of our history. It's become part of our culture. I know some of the ads that you guys promote really talk about and highlight how integrated the oil and gas industry has become in our state. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, one of the best examples that we've been able to come across is a gentleman named Tom Spedell, who is a second-generation florist of Spedell's Florist in Lafayette. And we met him throughout our travels across the state. We've done about 100 different presentations to groups and all types of gatherings across the state of Louisiana talking about the industry. And we met Tom. And Tom said something interesting to us when we met him. He said, when the industry does well, my business does well. And the fact that he's a florist in Lafayette, a family business, a small business, and the fact that the impact of the industry and what it means for the industry to be so prominent in the state and how far-reaching it is. It helps restaurants, auto dealerships, retailers, and it's been like that for 100 years. And what we tend to think of is, well, there's one example I've used in Houma. We went down to the BP heliport in Houma about a year and a half ago. And at the time, there were about 20,000 workers going in and out of that heliport every month. And so they leave at 5 in the morning. So we were going to talk to them about the coalition and how to be a part of what we're doing. So I stayed in Hampton Inn. That was right on the main drag there towards the heliport. And you pull in the evening before, and you look and see all these people there in coveralls and everything. And I was thinking about it, and if you go to that owner of the hotel and you say, what kind of business you're in? He would say, well, I'm in the hotel business. I rent rooms, I rent space to people who need them. But if you really look around at who was in that parking lot and who was in that hotel.
He's in the oil and gas business.
He's in the oil and gas business.
Absolutely.
For sure.
So, hotels, even things like florists, the list goes on and on and on, and the overall economic impact, not just the direct jobs, but as critically important, the indirect jobs that we see there are really, really significant. The industry's had a pretty difficult 18 to 24 months. Low oil prices globally driving some things and making some difficulties there in terms of employment. I want to take a break and come back and talk specifically about what's happened in the industry over the last 2 years or so. We're visiting with Marc Ehrhardt. He's the Executive Director of the Grow Louisiana Coalition, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
It might be one of the most efficient, most effective methods of communications we've ever used.
What if I said that the American dream is alive and well, and that it exists for anyone willing to build it? That the power of a nation does not reside in its monuments, but in the hearts and minds of those who built them, and that the country's greatest heroes also wear hard hats. In today's America, it's not enough to dream about the future. You have to build it. Build your future at byf.org.
For more than 25 years, the TJC Group has been helping industry communicate and build relationships with communities, elected officials, and governmental agencies. We are the leading firm in the U.S. for the development, management, and facilitation of industry-based community advisory panels.
Whether you're building a new facility or you manage an existing business, let us put our community and governmental relations experience to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
Spadel's Florist was founded over 30 years ago. From my mom's kitchen, we have grown into one of the largest florists in this area. There's a sense in our community that you stick together, good times or bad, and oil and gas is part of that family. They're my neighbors, they're my customers, they're the person I'm sitting next to at church. If oil and gas is doing well, all of our businesses are doing well. We are Louisiana Oil and Gas.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Marc Ehrhardt, the Executive Director of the Grow Louisiana Coalition, is our guest. We talked in the first segment, Marc, about the history of the industry in Louisiana, about the critical importance of the industry in Louisiana. But everyone knows the industry's also had a rough 24 months here. Downturn has affected a lot of our economy. It has most importantly affected the men and women who earn their living from the industry. Let's talk about the downturn, how big it's been, the impact it's had, and then we'll get into a little bit about how we're going to recover from that.
It's the last 2 years have been difficult in a variety of areas, a challenge. And a lot of times what we tend to forget in Louisiana is there are oil and natural gas jobs in every parish in the state. So it isn't something that's limited. Whenever the industry is doing well, all 64 parishes are doing well. And then when the market changes, which we've lived through even since the mid-'80s, the 4 times where something like this has happened. Now this one is taking a while, but this isn't something limited to one area. In fact, the interesting is when you look at Southwest Louisiana is doing very well and growing, whereas other parts of the state are still working through some difficult times. And there's a couple things that we tell folks when we talk about the price of oil quite a bit, is that there's some things we can control and some things we can't. And the price of oil, unfortunately, I can't control.
Global market, right?
It's a global market. Right. The benefits, though, is that what is happening with the price of oil is some people may think, well, we don't need oil and gas as much anymore. That's why the price is low. That's the farthest thing from the truth. BP puts out an economic study every year. And they do a global outlook, and then they'll do an outlook for the United States. And the latest version that came out in late July said that energy demand globally is going to increase by 25% between now and 2035. Another gentleman, I was at a conference recently where a professor from the University of Texas, I think he was a geologic economist, he said he created his whole discussion around if you ever want to talk to somebody about the importance of fossil fuels and resources, ask them where electricity comes from. He goes, because some people just think you plug it into the wall and it comes from nowhere, right? But that's where it comes from. And one of the indicators he said that you could look at about the global demand for oil and natural gas is India, and the number of cars in India that are being registered every 5 years. That number is doubling every 5 years.
Think about China and all these other emerging economies and emerging societies, and that's what's driving this extra demand for energy.
And that's right, and it's not limited to your automobile. Fossil fuels are used in women's makeup, pharmaceuticals, and medicines. And one of the things how you know the demand for oil and natural gas is going to continue to rise as consumers continue to become better consumers is something that everybody's walking around with, and that's a wireless phone, and which is really a handheld computer now. And those are all things that are made with petroleum products and utilized through natural gas as part of the process and things in there. So the demand for energy is increasing. We've become very, very good and efficient and safe around finding where those resources are. And the important thing for Louisiana, which is something we can control, is recognizing the amount of competition that exists around the country to find resources that are available. And we as a people and as a state can make sure we already are the best at doing it. We now have to make sure the state of Louisiana is competitive for businesses that want to be here.
You know, you talk about that, and I want to talk a little bit about this dichotomy that exists between what's happening in the crude oil industry and the natural gas industry. But Greg Gautreaux, who is the executive director, president, CEO of the Lafayette Economic Development Authority, has been on the show, and he said, you know, Tim, our economy exports this expertise around the world. But if you look at places like Lafayette, Houma, Thibodaux, Morgan City, you go down to other places along the Gulf Coast that are struggling because of the downturn in the crude oil industry. But you look at places like Baton Rouge and Lake Charles, the petrochemical industry, which is heavily dependent on natural gas, is booming. And so there's this real dichotomy out there in terms of, you know, one part of the industry that's struggling a little bit and one part of the industry that's doing very well. But you mentioned something that I think is critically important, is that we continue to protect, from an economic development perspective, these jobs and these industries, and we don't do anything to damage them. And we're going to talk more about that in the next segment. But let's talk a little bit about the forecast. Where do you see oil prices going? Where do you see the industry? What's the hope for recovery in that sector?
Well, I'm not an economist, and unfortunately, you know, you talk about things you can't control, and I say a lot, you know, I can't tell you when the price of oil is going to go up.
Lawrence Scott says predicting the price of a barrel of crude oil is the second most difficult thing to predict in the economy. It's tough. It's tough.
The guy I go back to is Lawrence Scott, because he's done a lot of this research. I've been telling you about, you know, all the taxes being paid and things. Dr. Scott did that research in partnership with us. And I saw something even yesterday where he said his expectation is that the price is going to stabilize over the next year or so and then could rise up into the mid-60s and things, maybe into 2018. But then what he said at the end was sort of a caveat, saying that's based off of what I'm looking at, but it could be anywhere between 45 and 85. He goes, it just depends on what happens around the world economy. The benefit for Louisiana is twofold. Number one, America is more energy independent now because of the work that we've been doing. Number two, we have 3 of the 15 largest refineries on the face of the earth in the state of Louisiana. And they aren't building new facilities like this anymore. So the fact that we have these large capacity refineries allows us to take the resources that are out there and create them into products. And that helps stabilize the industry.
Listen, I want to take a break and come back and talk about something that's critically important to the industry. You know, this whole idea of restoring Louisiana's coast is important to everybody in our state. I know it's important to the oil and gas industry as well. But Governor John Bel Edwards and his administration have chosen to be very aggressive in filing lawsuits and enjoining lawsuits against oil and gas companies in a lot of our parishes. And I want to talk a little bit about that when we come back from break. Great. We're visiting with Marc Ehrhardt. He is the executive director of the Grow Louisiana Coalition, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Promoting workplace safety and family wellness. That's our motto at Gulf Coast Occupational Medicine. The Gulf Coast staff is made up of some of the most knowledgeable and hardest working medical professionals in Louisiana. We care about your safety and your bottom line. With 8 convenient locations in the greater Baton Rouge area, our services include injury management, physical exams, medical surveillance, and substance abuse testing. For more information, visit us on the web at gcombr.info and ride the wave to safety.
For more than 20 years, the TJC Group has been helping companies assess their training needs and to develop programs that improve the effectiveness and productivity of their teams.
Training doesn't have to be expensive or complicated. Let us put our experience and expertise to work for you.
The TJC Group, facilitating solutions for business and industry.
What if I said that whatever good things you build you? And that in this economy, sweat never loses its value? What if I said that there isn't a challenge in the world too great for a craft professional with the right tools, and that the steps that lead from where you are to where you want to be can only be built by you? Build your future at byf.org.
Keene Miller traces its roots to the dawn of the petrochemical industry in Louisiana. As the legal needs of the sector grew, our firm emerged as a leader in environmental law, economic development, real estate, employment, utilities regulations, and more. Today, these same clients and those new to our state continue to rely upon the firm and its attorneys for creative ideas, practical advice, and Louisiana know-how. Industrial strength law. Learn more at KeeneMiller.com.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. We're visiting with Marc Ehrhardt, the Executive Director of the Grow Louisiana Coalition. Now, we mentioned as we were closing the last segment that there are these lawsuits that exist now going after the oil and gas industry, the deep pockets, to make them primarily responsible for funding the redevelopment of Louisiana's coast. And we'll talk a little bit about those lawsuits and the impact that they might be having. But talk about how this industry has been working for years to develop both the working coast and the communities where this is not something new to the oil and gas industry in terms of their concern for Louisiana's coastline.
No, by no means. In fact, I'll tell you what's been happening over the last 2 decades, but by telling you what's happening right now. Right now, there are literally dozens of coastal projects across South Louisiana that are partnerships between parishes, the federal government, the state government, and the oil and natural gas industry, either through funds that the industry is investing or in some cases, the utilization of scientists to actually work with universities and with communities on developing solutions and ways to address the coast. All of those things are happening right now, and what people who are supporting hurting the industry, what they don't want you to know is that it has been happening. Not only is it happening now, but it's been happening for about 20 years. In the last 4 or 5 years, the industry has invested $3 billion directly into coastal projects. One thing that's happening right now, which is actually pretty exciting, is that geologic scientists within the oil and natural gas industry have made available about $200 million in seismic maps. The best in the industry, because if you have to be the best at finding where the resources are, you have to have the best resources when it comes to seeing where everything is located. And they've turned it over to the New Orleans Geological Society, who have brought in 5 Louisiana universities to look at fault lines and study subsidence and all these natural occurrences and things so that the state and the communities of the state can have the best possible science when it comes to figuring out what to do with the coast. But throughout all of these things, what's consistent is that the industry is the #1 private investor in Louisiana's coast. The state's involved, parishes are involved, the federal government is involved. The only people who aren't are trial lawyers trying to make millions of dollars in fees for themselves.
It is an interesting study, I guess, in government and in politics to look at this and say, wouldn't we be much better off if we had all hands on deck in terms of this team? But rather the state is choosing now, through Governor Edwards' administration, to say, parishes, if you don't sue on your own, we will intervene and sue for you, which is a chilling chilling message to send to the industry. You and I were talking before we taped. It'd be like the state of Washington suing Microsoft.
That's right.
Its biggest employer. It just doesn't make a lot of sense from an economic development standpoint. We also talked about this. We invited these companies to come here. We have permitted them for the activity that they are engaged in along the Gulf. If a actor has violated its permit, let's go after them and let's make them pay for what they've done. But let's also look at it in the sense that these are permitted activities along our coast. LBIS Secretary President Stephen Waguespack wrote an article. He said basically what the governor is saying is sue the industry or get out of the way. That's what he's. That's right. Talk about the chilling impact, how we're hitting this industry when it's down. It's just hard to fathom.
You can't use the courtroom to fill budget gaps. And what's important for the state of Louisiana and what companies who've made billions of dollars of investments and hundreds of thousands of people who are working in the industry, that what they want is a good business climate that creates good jobs and good benefits for people. They don't want to create a climate that funds the government that the governor thinks he wants. And that's a big difference because the people of the state, and a lot of times they talk about the oil and natural gas business as, well, they're far away. They're in London, they're in Amsterdam, they're in California. That is the farthest thing from the truth. There are tens of thousands of Louisiana-based small businesses that are working in the oil and gas business right now. One of the major oil companies, just one, last year spent $1 billion in revenue in hiring Louisiana-based businesses. More than 600 businesses in Louisiana. That's just one of the large oil companies. So when you go and try to communicate not to the larger companies that we don't want you here, or when you cross the state line, we're going to sue you. What does that tell to the tens of thousands of small businesses who are integrated into the entire industry in the state of Louisiana? This isn't a problem between Louisiana and out-of-state businesses. This is a problem that is hurting Louisiana businesses.
Absolutely, and on a daily basis. And instead of having an opportunity for us all to work together on these coastal issues, we're benefiting the trial lawyers who are going to go in and sue these companies and hurt these small businesses. Exactly. We got about 30 seconds left. Mm-hmm. What's on the horizon both for the coalition and for the industry?
Couple things, and what we would encourage folks to do, if you support the oil and gas industry in the state of Louisiana, you need to have your voice heard. The only way that our leaders know that the industry is important to the state is by the people who support the industry, who may not be working at a refinery or working on a rig or might not be an engineer.
But they might be a florist.
That's exactly right. That they believe that the industry is important to the state and they speak out. You can go to growlouisianacoalition.com to sign up. One other thing is show up. There are hearings going on about the 5-year future of oil and gas in Louisiana and the Gulf of Mexico. Find out where those are and make your comments be heard. Make your comments be heard on the Coastal Master Plan. We can work together to fix this problem.
It's critically important. Marc Ehrhardt, thanks for your time today,
Tim.
buddy. That's a wrap, guys. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Hey guys, be sure to check out our new LBIS website, www.louisianabusinessandindustryshow.com.